Let's do this. The Cult of Hockey podcast by the faithful and for the faithful. I'm David Staples of the Edmonton Journal, and I'm here today with Bruce McCurdy. Hey, Bruce.
Good. How are you doing today? My cat here.
Cat Stevens. It is the morning after the night before. Is that the correct?
This is Cat Stevens, yes.
Yes, a very nice cat. Looks like a nice cat, Bruce. Is
is
that a fair comment? Is Cat Stevens a nice cat?
Mm-hmm.
Bruce, we're doing a podcast.
Hug.
All right. How's our sound, Bruce? Am I lagging at all there? Do you think? We're doing this in part because Okay, because it seems like you're kind of breaking in on my comments, and I'm wondering if it's because I'm lagging a little bit. The voice is lagging a little bit, but
it's
anyway,
just me interrupting you.
Okay, it's just business as usual. Us interrupting each other. Okay, that's good to know. That's good to know. No unusual problems here. All right, Bruce, we're going to give this a go here, and what we're going to talk about is Pierre McGuire, NBC former NHL coach and NBC analyst, has made some rather caustic comments about the Edmonton Oilers today, and we're going to go through them. Ryan Rashog of TSN also has some interesting comments, so we can talk about those as well. Have you seen? I don't know if you've seen Rashog's comments or not.
Not yet. I heard him on the Nielsen, so likely something. I'll be happy to respond to Rashog's print there. There it is.
Yeah. Alrighty, let's start it off, and I'll read McGuire's first comment and get your reaction to it. Here we go. And he says, quote, it's 2 years in a row. They got beat last year by Chicago. I was there every game against Chicago. It's the same movie. It's just a different year. What do you make of that, Bruce?
I didn't see him saying he was there every game this year. So he's comparing what he saw and remembers last year. Or, the results of the series. Thinks that this series was similar to last year's series against Chicago. He's not a very good analyst.
Yeah, I can't imagine in some like the two series were so profoundly different. First, there's the circumstance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Last year was the what do they call it, the bubble, and the Oilers hadn't played in many months. They came back and they were completely discombobulated against the Winnipeg Jets at that point. They were the goaltending was terrible. Mike Smith was terrible. In the little that he played. Mikko Koskinen was mediocre. The top four defense is the cat purring there? The top.
You hear that?
Yeah, I can hear that. The top four defense were completely discombobulated as well. Darnell Nurse was so iffy last year against the Senators. Adam Larson was hurt. Oscar Klefbom was hurt. Ethan Bear was a man, and it was so that was different this year. I would say that generally speaking, Larson and Nurse played very well. Larson played well. Kulikov was okayish, and I think they at right D in the top pairing. I think it's fair to say, except in the last game, Tyson Barrie came through with a very solid game. But Ethan Bear on right defense and Ethan Bear and Tyson Barrie overall struggled a little bit defensively, or a lot defensively in various moments. So it wasn't perfect, but there was some really good play. I think. Listen, we've stressed this again and again how close the scoring chances were. The Jets in the end had a slight advantage in grade A chances. Some other people who rate the series actually have the Oilers with an advantage in overall shot quality, and a considerable one. We have it the Jets with a slight advantage. I thought this year the goaltending, Mike Smith, I thought was good to great. I thought he was, did he Did he make all the saves that you hope he would make? No. But essentially, Bruce, this series came down to 4 shots, 4 plays, where the Winnipeg Jets were able to score goals in a necessary moment, and the Oilers didn't. The Oilers lacked composure overall on defense against the Chicago Blackhawks last year. This year, they lacked composure in just a very few key moments. And the good news is that kind of thing can be taught. That's you learn from brutal experience, and that's the kind of thing a good coach like Dave Tippett can teach to a team. And I think that their overall defensive stance and composure was better. It let them down though in a big way in some key moments, and some personnel changes are going to help with that, I think. But mainly what's going to help is bitter experience and a desire to get better at it, which I think the Oilers exhibit as a team.
Yeah. Playoffs. I mean, many people were singling out Chris Russell as being the best of the Oilers defensemen, and due respect to Chris Russell, but that's not a good sign. And especially when you consider that three Chicago goals bounced into the Oilers' net off of Chris Russell, meaning that whatever he was doing, it wasn't always working, to put it politely. And yet, the top 4 was struggling to such a degree that they really were having trouble preventing shot tips from the slot in particular. That they're controlling their own slot very well. And as you say, both Larson with his wonky back and Clefbaum shoulder that wound up costing him the entire season this year were a mess. And in fact, there were some reports that Clefbaum had considered not even coming back for the playoffs, and he didn't want to let his team down. And in the end, but he was close to what he can be. And that series was defensively, it was a mess. Offensively, the Oilers scored against Chicago as you would expect them to, and they couldn't keep the puck out enough. But otherwise, this year, as you say, Nurse, I thought he was outstanding last night. I agreed with Kurt's grade of a 9 for Nurse last night. With all the minutes he played, 3rd most in NHL history, with the other 2 being 5 overtime games. I mean, he just was an absolute workhorse out there. And Barry, I thought last night was excellent. One of his very best games that he played all year, Tyson Barrie. Two of his best games by the time he played 107 minutes. But there was a little bit of erratic. I will mention Adam Larson. I mean, he was fine for the most part, but I think if you go through our scoring chance summary, you'll find that there was at least 1 goal in each of the 4 games where Adam Larson was singled out as one of the culprits on the goal against. And when you lose 4 1-goal games and your shutdown defense pairing is getting burned for goals, then maybe you can't be too happy with that.
Yeah, and including last night on the winning goal, right? He was caught up ice.
Yep,
fatigue was a factor in that with McDavid and him on that play for both of those players. And there was a bad coaching decision, I think, to call Ethan Bear off the ice too early. 25 seconds into his shift, that had disastrous consequences, much more than they thought was going to happen. But it did happen, and that's what happens on the long change. Yeah, Bruce Larson, I don't know if the pairing with Kulikov ever really, maybe if they bring back Kulikov and they have a whole year to play together, it could come together. I think, Kulikov is a depth defenseman. I don't think he's a top 4 defenseman, though, on a good team. And it's going to be interesting with Barrie and Bear. They both had struggles this year on defense, and maybe we'll see. I've always been assuming they're going to let Barrie go, but maybe they'll keep Barrie and move Bear and promote Bouchard. Maybe that's the direction they're going to go. Go with the 2 more veteran players and hope that Bouchard steps up into your top 4 as a defenseman, with Barrie there kind of as the caretaker. If you're in a win now mode, that might be the way you would go. If you think we're going to go for it in the next couple of years, you might pick Tyson Barrie over Ethan Barry, if you can get Barry on a decent contract. Anyway, this is one of the things that's going to be discussed about. Let's go to his next comment. Do you have it ready, Bruce, or do you want me to read it? Josh Archibald.
Oh yeah, are we down to Archibald already? Okay.
Yeah.
I thought there was one before that.
I'll read it here. Quote, what happened with Josh Archibald in game 3? That can't happen.
Oh, okay.
That's decision making. And Dave Tippett is an elite coach, not a little bit good, really good. But for him to have put Josh Archibald back on the ice after what he did with the clipping play in the neutral zone that got him a 1-game suspension, that cost them that game for sure. It just wasn't smart. That's part of the problem. Okay. Well, I think we can all agree that the Archibald hit was a, yeah. So go ahead, Bruce. It seems like you have something to say.
What the hell are you talking about, Pierre? I mean, seriously? Like, he took a penalty. It was costly. But you're actually going to bench one of your regular checkers with a 4-2 lead because he took a penalty before? You're going to bench that guy? I mean, he got benched last night by the league. And the Oilers missed him last night. I would posit, but the idea that I should have got sat after that, it just makes no sense. I mean, Pierre used to be a coach. I don't know if he was an elite coach as he refers to Dave Tippett, but put Josh Archibald back on the ice. That in the game for sure. It just wasn't smart. And with all that said, Archibald was out on the ice on the 3rd and 5th Winnipeg goals. So,
did we have him? I don't think we
do. We did. I think on the 3rd goal and on the 5th goal.
Oh,
they didn't quite off the face-off. Remember, Carroll lost the face-off.
Yeah,
and Archibald tried to get a stick in there, and Oilers kind of deked around him with the toe drag. But Archibald did get beat, in my opinion. So, but that hindsight, that's a different issue than saying, well, he shouldn't have been back on the ice. Yeah, you're going to bench your one of your top penalty killers and defensive players the game that you're leading. I mean, it's just not logical.
And the other thing about it, Bruce, is this was a mistake of what I would call over-aggression. So this is a player who is aggressive, and you want him to be aggressive and playing on the edge, actually. You want Josh Archibald to be playing just at the edge, hopefully not taking it over it. But if you ask someone, and if you're encouraging someone to play at the edge, they're going to go over the edge now and then. It's going to happen. And if you bench them for that, what kind of a message as a coach are you sending then? Like, I can see, like, for a bonehead mental mistake, and you could argue that's what that was in that moment, but it's more like an over-aggressive play. And I don't think you bench players for being too aggressive. And I don't think it was was it an undisciplined penalty? Like, was he headhunting Logan Stanley to get revenge? Well, knee hunting, it's all just, this is hockey. Things happen fast. It was a bang bang play, and yeah, benching him is just, he's a player that could help you win the game, and you needed him to. Tippett needed that player. Looking down the bench, he needed Josh Archibald in those final minutes to help them win the game. It didn't happen that way, but I agree. Benching, just like, that was a voice out of 1970 or 1990 when Pierre was coaching, where you automatically bench players. That happened all the time, and I don't buy it.
Or out of 2024 when players got benched, but yeah, I mean, if Archibald wants to go headhunting on Logan Stanley, he's going to need to rent a balloon. Right? I mean, Stanley's like 6'7", and I mean,
yeah,
isn't that Stanley's knee is out there? There is that body difference, and in his very slight defense, I'll say that Archibald ducked Stanley's stick, but the hit was unnecessary. It was dumb. It was costly, and I'm guessing that Josh Archibald's flight home from Winnipeg, in the press box watching his team play 6 periods last night, was not a very comfortable ride.
I think it's easy to pick on one moment, this moment, that moment, after a very tough playoff loss, 4-game sweep. It's hard to stomach the whole thing. But I just think there's going to be lots of knee-jerk reactions, and glib reactions. And I many of what McGuire had to say here, I'm going to categorize as both glib and knee jerk, not particularly astute commentary. Although he did make I think a few good points that we're going to get to. Are you ready for his next comment?
Yeah, I got the next one. They've got to decide what kind of players they want on the team, what type of style they want to play, and how committed are their star players to playing a 200-foot game.
And I'll just add the related comment to that. We'll just deal with that right now, because he was asked then if Draisaitl and McDavid need to be sat down and given the talk like Scotty Bowman gave to Steve Yzerman, which has now become like this mind-numbingly tedious narrative that we've heard repeatedly.
Thank you, David.
And so McGuire's response to that, that was raised, and he went into how this had happened and how this had turned Steve Yzerman into one of the greatest. He listened to Scotty and turned him into one of the greatest winners of all time. And then he says, I don't know those players, referring to McDavid and Draisaitl, well enough. I know them as players. I don't know them well enough as people. So I don't know whether they could accept it or not. But I'll tell you what, it has to happen. It definitely has to happen, which is total rubbish and BS. And you don't think that Dave Tippett hasn't been working and Todd McClellan before them nonstop on their defensive games? And if you've watched the team closely this year, I'm going to assert, if you haven't noticed that Connor McDavid took a big step up in his defensive game this year, you didn't watch the Oilers very closely at all. His defensive slot coverage was much better. In terms of Leon Draisaitl, you and I often argue back and forth about Draisaitl. I'm a little harder on his defense than you are, but I think but I think we are in agreement of one thing: when Leon Draisaitl wants to play defensive hockey, he is an exemplary defensive player. He is an outstanding defensive player, and I didn't have a ton of problems with his defensive play in this series at all. There was a few plays, but generally, I do think that as the Oilers progress as a team, they need to separate those guys and get them on different lines. If you want to get the most out of those two players, those two performers as two-way players, the most they can help the team win, it's going to be centering their own lines. And I wish that Dave Tippett had figured out a way to get two lines that worked this year, with them centering their two lines. He was not successful at doing that, and I think it had repercussions in the playoffs. Part of the problem is the lack of personnel, but I wish Tippett had worked a little harder through the year to find better line combinations. So that, that's one thing. But to say that these two guys somehow need to have this talking to, come on.
Yeah, well, for a little bit of context, Scotty Bowman had his famous chat with Steve Yzerman. I think it was either after the 94 or 95 losses. They lost to San Jose. Detroit did in 94, and in Game 7, all the way to the finals and got swept. But and there, I mean, at that point in his career, Steve Yzerman is 30 years old, right? He's old. He's Nugent-Hopkins is now. I mean, McDavid is 24. Is 25. They are still in their absolute peak as offensive producers. Yzerman, that peak was in the rear view to find, other ways to expand players do similar, as they get older. Steve Yzerman, due respect to Steve, the best player on the time. I hope that Pierre McGuire is not making that claim about Connor McDavid.
Yeah. All right. Let me just find another comment here from McGuire. Quote, they cannot come back with the same. You got it? Okay, go ahead.
Sorry. They cannot come back with the same lineup they had last year that they had this year. And if they do, then they're doomed for failure.
The old doomed for failure. We're all doomed.
Yeah,
we're all doomed, Pierre. One day or another, it's coming for us, the Grim Reaper. We are all doomed. Yes, thank you, Cassandra. Come on. Jeez. I don't know, Bruce. Like, every team has to make changes every year. Every team must make changes every year. And Ken Holland in his first year made a number of them. He brought in 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 players that year. And what he said after that was, we're not doing that again. Every year, we are going to take a more patient approach, building this team from within, and we're going to be patient and consistent. And there's going to be a couple changes every year. So that's what we had last summer. That's what we're going to see again this year, Bruce. We are going to see 2 or 3 new players brought in, not maybe 4. And some of those are going to be internal players. It's going to be Ryan McLeod or Dylan Holloway or Tyler Benson that move up. So it's going to be from within the same system. Yes, they're going to have to make some big decisions on Tyson Barrie and Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, and maybe a couple other guys, James Neal and Mikko Koskinen. So there's some big decisions Holland has to make, and he's going to have a bit more money to play with. But this whole thing that they're doomed. This is a team with Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, Darnell Nurse, and just a core that other teams would kill for. They're going to need some. They got to bring in another goalie. But Jesse Puljujärvi stepping up. They've got lots of good young defensemen. They've got Evan Bouchard and Philip Broberry waiting in the wings as defensemen. They've got Ethan Bear, Caleb Jones, William Lagesson, Slater Cuckoo, who are some decent depth defensemen. They've got Adam Larson and Nurse, 2 very strong top 4 D-men.
Larson too.
Yeah, I think they're going to sign him if I'm reading the tea leaves right. So they're doomed, Bruce. But they're doomed somehow. Mm-hmm. If they don't do what?
Well,
get rid of everybody.
I mean, Glenn Sather changed the 1984 Stanley Cup champions. One of the first things he did that summer was trade Ken Linseman for, right? And it was, partly it was circumstances changed on his team. They moved Mark Messier from wing into not too many centers. They traded a center out for a winger. Makes sense. Stuff happens. Stuff changes. I still don't think the Oilers know what they have in Leon Draisaitl, or know how they're going to focus Leon Draisaitl, because he's a center and a winger, and all situations player at all forward positions, and so that's something they need to work out before they decide what kind of changes they're going to make. But yes, of course they have to make changes, and part of the consideration has to be, I think they need to decide if they're going to commit to these younger guys and say, we're going to give Ryan McLeod a full shot. We think he showed enough that he can be a 3 or at least a 4C on our team next year. Let's keep our cap budget to solve another problem, because we think that problem we've got a pretty decent solution internally. I mean, maybe they say that, maybe they think he didn't show enough. Same thing about Evan Bouchard. How ready is he, and how big of a role is he willing to take? Let's plug him into that role on our whiteboard, and build around him, but commit to giving these guys, that have been developing for quite some time now, in the new model. Let's figure out that we can do internally, but even if they're internal, there's still changes. Making changes. There's a 100% chance that there will. Of course, they won't be bringing back the same lineup they had last year. Yeah, indeed. All right. The next quote is about Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. He's asked about whether they should walk away from Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, and the host of the show, Ottawa TSN 1200, was skeptical about bringing Nugent-Hopkins back because he hadn't had great success this year. And McGuire said with his usual confidence, I would try to resign him. He's one of the players that they have that's committed to 200-foot hockey. If in fact they let him go to market, there will be no shortage of suitors for Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. If you let him go, that's fine. Tell me, who are you going to replace him with? So what's your take on that, Bruce? That they if they do let him go, they will have to replace him. But I mean, it's all going to come down to negotiation. Right now, the Oilers have a negotiating window with the Nuge. There's every indication that he might say, let's see what I can get on the open market. Let's get an offer from the Oilers, and let's see what when that little window for the expansion draft, and then if need be, let's go to July 1st. But price point and a term that is agreed to both sides, I kind of did at this moment without him going through that. But in recent years, several Oilers go to Ken Holland's offer on day 2 or even the afternoon of day 1 of free agency. So, I mean, and one approach for the Seattle situation is to not protect Nuge and then right after the expansion draft process is finished. There's a number of solutions. It's a very difficult man to replace in terms of you won't find, I don't think, any one player out there that does all of the things that he does, but you might find 2 or 3 guys, various things that he does and do them better. You know, I mean, his scoring really in 2021, and after a number of years, scored 7 even strength goals this year.
Yeah.
After being in the high teens for a number, so it's really been a drop. And he's at that age where, as you pointed out before, some players, their late 20s that are decent on that offensive fall off. And for all the other stuff that he brings, is it worth another long-term deal at the same or even more a cap hit?
You know, is he Patrick Marleau or is he Kyle Turris? And you don't know. Like,
Right.
What's concerning is that at the age he's at, I think he's 28 this year, he had a year that where he trended down significantly as a player. I don't think there's any other way to put it. Like, if we're completely honest, he just trended down as a player. He wasn't nearly as effective. And we saw his best game last night. Him crank it up and have this absolutely fantastic two-way game. But other than that, like this notion that he's this 200-foot leader on the Oilers, well, you know, he did play well defensively on the wing. He hasn't played well defensively at center when he's done that. It will be difficult to replace him. But on the other hand, they have lots of young wingers coming up, and there's wingers on the market. So the term and the price have to be right for both Nugent-Hopkins and the Oilers. And I don't think the Oilers, I think it would be a huge mistake to go 8 years, 6 years, even 5 years with Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, Bruce, for big money at this point. From what I saw this year, I just think that's too big a risk, given what I saw this year. What I would like to see would be a short-term contract where he gets the money that he wants in the short term. You know, whatever he's asking for, give him that and give him a little bit more, but have him pare down the years and say, hey, you didn't work out. You were playing with McDavid and Draisaitl this year, 2 of the best offensive centers in hockey, and you struggled on the attack. We really like you as a player, and we want to give you the money that you think that you deserve. You know, whatever that sum is, we'll check that box. But the term is a big issue right now, Ryan, because of the way it went this year. And how does that sound to you? Does that sound fair? Because I think it sounds fair. I think that's a reasonable position for Holland to take. And that's what I hope that they do.
But he could very well take that free agency window with Seattle and say, Seattle says, okay, we've got this guy here from the high-powered Oilers. He's a center, but he can't get, he's not in a position because of centers in the league. I mean, I'm not saying it's all going to be perfectly right, and it's not quite that cut and dried, but maybe they go, hey, you know, we really need an experienced all-around player on our team. Here's how about 6 times $7 million, and
well, then
happens,
he should,
gone.
And I'd be okay with that. Like if that's what happens, I'm okay with that. Would you be okay with that?
Well, I'd be sad. Can't
Yeah,
lie,
I'd be
but
sad.
I don't know. You times $7 million.
Well, that's it. Like look at all these teams, Bruce, who have signed players in like heading into their 30s. How's that worked out for the majority of the teams that have gone with those contracts? Exactly. So hockey, you need experienced, good players, but like there's also got to be a reasonable deal that works for both sides. I hope they can get there with Nugent. I really hope they can get there. And I think a 3-year deal where like as long as 3 years, I would go, let's say he wants $7 million a year. 3 years at $7 million. Okay, we'll do that for you. We'll take that risk. We'll make that bet on you for 3 years or 2 years, which I would really prefer on $7 million.
Yeah.
But that's the deal. And then you can still earn money when you're 32, 33, 34. You can earn 15, $10 million a year if you become this, if you kill it. But if you don't, then, that's the bet. Now, maybe he's going to bet on security. He has made a lot of money, though. But who's going to turn? Listen, Ray Ferraro says players are chumps, fools. You don't like players are ill-advised, is how he would put, I think, not to take as much money as they can and to take the hometown discount. He thinks that's a really bad idea. I'm not going to argue with Ray Ferraro or any NHL player who argues that. So if Nugent-Hopkins can get more money in term elsewhere, hey, more power to him. That's the way the world works, and I'm okay with that. I would hate to see him go at the same time. All right, we come to the final comment from McGuire. Bruce?
Yeah.
They
outcoached Dave Tippett. I'll tell you. Outcoach.
Here's what I would say. I would say that Winnipeg played its peak game. I don't imagine the Jets can play a better defensive hockey than that against the Edmonton Oilers. They were outstanding defensively. Within the permitted rules of the NHL today, where hooking, interfering, tackling is allowed, they played a great defensive hockey game. It was like the Calgary Flames in 1986 against the Edmonton Oilers. The 7 rules of Bob Johnson, which were hook, hold, slash, interfere. If you want to boil it down, and check and listen. To be fair, check the hell out of them, and diligently back check. I'm overplaying the fouling. The Jets were just fantastic defensively. They really were. And so Maurice had his team playing peak defensive hockey. Tippett did a pretty good job there too, but the Oilers lost their composure in key moments on defense in games 3 and in games 4. That hasn't been coached out of them yet. And, it wasn't just the Ethan Bear turnover in game 4, in the third period. Horrendous turnover. I think we can all agree. Up the middle of the ice, to know, in not even on particularly hard passes, if I recall it correctly. When you're protecting
a problem, he didn't get any zip.
Yeah, when you're protecting a 1-goal lead, but in the moment after that, everybody panicked. Every other player then lost their minds as well, right? Which tends to happen after a bad turnover. Kuka goes sliding over to try to block the shot, takes himself out of the play. Kara screams by. The other guy, Devon Shore, doesn't cover the guy in the slot. Bear himself he's in the red light zone, not covering anyone and not covering any passing lanes, and they score. So there was, as Tippett himself said, there's the turnovers that happened, and they happened in game 3 as well. With Kulikov and McDavid making key turnovers on goals. But it's what you do after that can make the difference. And what they did after in this year didn't speak necessarily well to either the Oilers or their coaching at this point. But they're getting better. Their defensive play improved. And there was other issues with Tippett's coaching. I think he should have used some more players in overtime. He ran those guys down to till they were performing at 50 or 60% of capacity, 70% tops. Why not work in some of these other players? And you might be able to take advantage of the Jets, who are also tired out there. So you can make criticisms of Tippett as a coach, but he's a good coach.
Sure.
He is a very good coach, and his special teams have been great. His faith in Mike Smith paid off handsomely for the Edmonton Oilers. That's Tippett. His handling of Mike Smith has paid off for the Edmonton Oilers. And their even strength play is getting better. They're trending up in terms of their even strength play. I think Dave Tippett, he got outcoached by Paul Maurice in the playoffs. I think that's where McGuire makes a fair comment. But definitely keep him as the coach. Some people are saying there's lots of people who want to fire the coach. I'm not in that school.
Well, the results speak for themselves. I mean, they've made the playoffs both years under Dave Tippett. I call last season the playoff. They've made the postseason under both years and comfortably in both years, which is a good thing. Once they got there, 7 losses, including 6 in a row losses, basically all of them by 1 goal, but they're always on the wrong side of that goal. And I understand people's frustration. I'm frustrated. I mean, you got to find a way to win a game. You got to find a way to protect a damn lead. The Oilers led three games in this series. never trailed in the fourth. All four. And that, uh, if after the regular season where they blew, I think, 2 leads in the third period all year long, well, they blew a lead in the third period in both games 3 and 4. And so whatever they'd been, they couldn't level the performance when the line. And some of that's on the coach. And sure, after the 3-3 goal, he basically benched Slater Kukuk, Ethan Bear, Jujar Kara, and Alex Chason, all of whom are on the ice for that goal, and basically didn't see the ice again after that meltdown. Well, hey, coach, had those guys on the ice matched up against Wheeler, Scheifele, and Connor. Okay? Minute they're okay for that. Then there's another, and I think this is a valid question. One day, Ethan Bear is considered good enough to be the first pairing right shot defenseman. The next day, he's sitting on the bench for 60 minutes. And how do you go from being the first pairing guy one day to the very next day being completely, even participating in the game? Like, there's some puzzling changes of pace from coaching staff on some of these decisions that they bear scrutiny. Let's put it that way.
They do. He needs to think about what happened in these games himself. And the whole thing with Bear being out there, he was sent out to kill that. After sitting 60 minutes, they finally sent him out to kill off the end of that penalty, and they yank him. He's only out there 15 seconds and 20 seconds, and he's got to skate right to the bench. Well, that's just so happens that's why they scored the winning goal. That's part of the sequence of pain on the winning goal, because if they hadn't made that change, and for no good reason, just lack of trust in the player, they trusted him enough to go out there to kill off the penalty. Why not trust him in that moment? Why yank him off the ice? Like, because he might have even made a bad decision to head off the ice, Bruce, a little early before it was completely safe, because he knew he had to get off the ice. Maybe that's the instruction. I can't see any other reason he's getting off the ice then. His skate wasn't falling off his foot like previously we've seen that. He just came off the ice. I think he was under instructions. That's a coaching mistake. Like, send him out there, play your shift. Let's get you back in the game, man. Let's get Cuckoo back in the game, who has been playing very well. Maybe the Oilers' second best defenseman in this series was Slater Cuckoo, and you're benching him in overtime. I didn't get that at all. Like, that made zero sense to me, Bruce. I know he made a diving play to try to stop that goal, but come on. It's the third goal that Winnipeg scored to tie it. That's hardly on, that's what players do in a panic situation after a horrendous turnover. They all puck watch. They all focus on the puck. They all get drawn to it like the moth to the flame, and they make mistakes, and the open man scores. So I didn't like mention that guy.
Yeah, we don't know, and we probably will never know if Bear was called, if he was seriously instructed, kill the rest of this penalty and get off as quickly as you can so we another 2 periods, or if he just made the decision on his own. Okay, I accomplished my job. McDavid's got the puck. He's going into the zone. It's safe to get off. And he did hustle for the change. It's not like he glided to the bench. And Barry, to his credit, he came blasting back. But the message I got is, well, we don't trust Barry to kill the penalty, but we don't trust play at even strength. So change one for the other ASAP. And that change was a killer. And Barry, I mean, he for a guy playing his 58 or whatever the hell he played last night. Just a second here, he played 49 minutes. For a guy 50th minute, he showed a real burst to force Connor to shoot when he shot, but unfortunately that was a good enough shot to end the game, and it was the breakaway was a result of the line change. There's no other way to put it.
My other beef with Tippett, which I've raised before in these playoffs, is 2 years in a row, he's only resorted to his best line in the last game, kind of in the last moments. So last year it was the dynamite line, which was just killing it. through the regular season, and we didn't see that line till the very end. I just think that was a horrendous mistake last year, honestly. And this year they had this 82% solution line, McDavid, Draisaitl, and Yamamoto, and he finally went to them towards in the last part of Game 4, last half of Game 4, and I just wonder why. Like when you reunite it, like why not go to them earlier? Now maybe Yamamoto was banged up, and Puljujärvi was playing well with McDavid and Draisaitl. But when you have something that's really worked, like I want to give the coach credit for coming up with these great lines. Like he did come up with the dynamite line. He came up with the 82% solution line. But man, when you have something, make the other team stop that something. Make them shut it down, and make sure that they can't defense that line before you break it up. And so I have a question about that as well. It befuddles me, Bruce, that happened 2 years in a row. Let's go to Ryan Rishaug. Go ahead.
Say Yamamoto, what did he score? 1 goal in his last 30 games?
Yeah, fair enough.
I'm not sure putting him with your top 2 offensive players is necessarily going to be the. I don't know if he's got some kind of issue with it, maybe a wrist or something, because his shot has been a total muffin for weeks, months, and I'm not sure if maybe he just never really had a shot, but he'd stuffed a few home enough last year that we thought he was a finisher. But this year it just his away, and he had 8 goals in 52 games, but he had most half.
Bruce, let's end this off. Ryan Rishaug he went back to Ryan Rishaug of TSN, who's a very sensible commentator on the Oilers. I like his work a lot. He was questioning kind of Holland at the trade deadline a bit here, and he was saying, quote, "The organization decided not to push in too many chips this season, conservative at the deadline, preserving picks and assets. While that makes sense on a lot of levels, the price for that decision is in the playoffs when the big moments arrive. You don't have the players you need. A 3 left center for D-zone draws. A good scoring winger to shoulder some of the load. Things everyone knew they needed. The organization hoped the current group would push deeper as its constructed. They didn't, and the holes were obvious. Because of the flat cap, that decision is more than justifiable, but the fact remains it's another year of 97-29 in their prime where they come up short with not enough help around them." I'm going to suggest this is a really fair comment on Ryan's part. A lot of people, I was disappointed that they weren't able to do something more at the trade deadline, although I have to say, when I saw the prices paid for some of the players like Foligno in Toronto, a first pick for a guy who had lower scoring than Kyle Turris this year at even strength, I kind of wondered what was out there. There was a lot of flack at Edmonton. They didn't get Taylor Hall. Well, did Taylor Hall even want to come here? We don't know. And what would have been the price for Taylor Hall if he did come here? We don't. It's hard to say. Like, it's hard to say definitively that Holland's screwed up. I would have liked that he had done better. I would have liked that he brought in a bigger piece for the Oilers, but we don't know who was there and at what price. And without that knowledge, you could say we should have traded the first round pick and got what he could get, no matter what that should have been what he did. Is that really the right thing to do long term? Was that the right idea? It's kind of an unknowable on a certain level. Your thoughts?
Especially when you don't have any cap space, really. I mean, there are ways to get around those problems to some extent, but not without increasing the price of making the trade. You have to turn extra draft picks to get other teams to eat cap and that kind of thing. And the trouble was he traded 4 draft picks out last year going forward in the deadline and some deals that didn't work out. It's not a good look on the GM when the one piece that he went out and picked up to help the team in the playoffs gets press boxed by the coach in the elimination game. Dmitry Kulikov got sent upstairs last night. So unimpressed was Tippett with his performance in the first 3 games of the series. Is my take that he decided Chris Russell was a better bet for the final game, which of course they had Russell all along. So that kind of, I thought Kulikov was a pretty decent addition, but it didn't really work out, just like last year's additions didn't really work out. And so more needs to be done. And then you look at some of the creative things that were done elsewhere. I mean, Kyle Dubas in Toronto, he traded a conditional seventh round pick for Riley Nash, a right shot defensive center who can kill penalties and take face-offs. Seventh round pick, conditional pick. And guess what? Already in game 3 of their series last night, Toronto had 2 centers injured, and into the lineup goes Riley Nash with his cap hit of $0 because he was injured when Toronto picked him up, and he didn't have. There was no way he was going to the rest of the regular season, but he was going to be physically ready for the playoffs. That's a creative deal by a creative GM, and Edmonton didn't make that deal. I mean, there's not 100 deals to be made by that, but that was a pretty crafty pickup by Kyle Dubas, and it's already bearing some dividends. Nash played 10 minutes last night. They won 2-1.
I think it's a fair comment to question him at the deadline, what he did or didn't do. Like, I was not happy at the time. I think it's fair to criticize him for it, not being as creative as some GMs. No problem with that at all. I think people can weigh in, and that's a reasonable kind of take to make. Bruce, final thoughts? We'll be back. Go ahead.
I hope this podcast records a whole lot better than last night's did. What a pain in the butt to be friggin' 1 o'clock in the morning and doing a 50-minute podcast on a 5-hour game, only to have the whole technology platform just go south on us. And I really do apologize to our loyal listeners for the quality of that one. We're trying to bring it to you live and be a little bit more get it to you as fast as we can after the games, but we have had technical issues. There's no lying. At least now we're beyond that phase. We're doing this one trial podcast on that platform, but we're beyond that phase where things are so time sensitive that we can use tried and true technology as we continue to podcast during the off season.
Yeah, that was embarrassing. That was embarrassing for us, and thanks for bearing with us if you've done so, because we weren't happy about that at all. And it's one of the reasons we're back in the saddle this morning to do another podcast so we can put something up that doesn't embarrass us. So we're doing this live thing because we think it's an added bonus for people listening to have it live, especially after games. So we're trying something new here, and nothing ventured, nothing gained. So we are going to see if this works and continue to work on the technical issues. And I've read a few comments today so far, Bruce. It does seem like it's worked a little bit. Just don't end the podcast. Technology has workarounds, they say. Yeah, we're not ending the podcast. We would just go back to Skype.
Definitely not.
But we do want to have a little less glitchy. Today, Bruce was technically off. Someone says, there we go. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. If this doesn't work, it doesn't work, and we'll go back to Skype and do the old way, which wasn't that bad. We just wanted to try to get something a little bit better. So see how it goes from here.
Well, if I want to be embarrassed, I just want to embarrass myself. I'm very good at doing that. I don't need friggin' technology glitches to add to it.
And that goes probably triply for me, Bruce. So, all right. Bruce, thanks for talking today.
Yeah, thanks for listening, everyone.
And in the meantime, and in between times, this has been another edition of the Cult of Hockey podcast.